So mas malamang dito, yung may-ari mismo ng sinihan, baka lang sa simula, hindi ganun kalaki ang kitahin niya or break-even pa siya dahil baka walang manood eh. I'm one with the economic team na buksan ang economy pero gradual para sa akin. Hindi natin pwedeng biglain. Sayang yung gains that we have had for Metro Manila.
And that is MMDA Chairman Abalos questioning if there really is any clamor for cinemas to reopen. Like him, Metro Manila mayors want to defer the reopening of movie houses.
But that has already been pushed back from its original reopening today. Movie theaters and other leisure establishments will restart activities on March 1 instead. Good evening, I'm Gretchen Hall.
And I'm Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. Metro Manila mayors are not in favor of the plan to open up movie theaters and leisure establishments for the time being.
And with that, the palace announces the move will be pushed back to March. Marian Enriquez with The Big Story.
Metro Manila mayors oppose the planned reopening of cinemas and other leisure establishments. San Juan City Mayor Francis Zamora alleges lack of consultation before the resolution was announced.
Ako bilang mayor, siyempre ayaw ho natin na gumawa ng mga bagay na posibleng maging dahilan pa ho ng muling pagtaas ng mga kaso.
The IATF announced last week that cinemas, game arcades, museums, libraries, and other leisure venues in general community quarantine areas will be allowed to reopen. This was meant to push economic activity and bring back jobs. But Metro Manila mayors and MMDA Chairman Benher Abalos, who is a former Mandaluyong City mayor, said such easing should be done gradually. He says reopening movie theaters will likely put the country's progress against the pandemic to waste.
It is enclosed. You'll have to stay there for more than 1 hour. At of course, yung aerosol, medyo yung mga virus, no, baka lalong kumalat.
He questions if there was even public clamor to reopen cinemas to begin with.
Siguro ikaw, maski libre sine, kakabahan ka kung dadali mo anak mo, baka magkasakit eh.
Mayor Zamora says waiting for the vaccines before reopening cinemas may be a better option to contain infections. Following concerns on the ease restriction, Malacanang says the reopening of cinemas will be pushed back to March 1. NCR mayors will also discuss the issue and prepare the implementing rules and regulations tonight. The IATF will also meet with Metro Manila mayors on Wednesday. The task force has said that it will be up to LGUs to create guidelines on whether or not to reopen cinemas in their areas. For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
The Department of Health says guidelines for proper ventilation should be expected once cinemas reopen. That's a matter of when, not if. To give us more details on this, we have with us on the line DOH Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere. Yusek Vergere, proper ventilation, what might that mean?
Well, sir, based from the standards as issued by the Department of Labor and Employment, there is this proper circulation, especially in enclosed spaces. So first, the air should not be recirculated. Second, there should be or proper ventilation. So for example, you are in an enclosed space and then there is air condition. So the air condition filter should be working, and there should be additional filters, like for example, a HEPA filter, so that they can be able to filter these microorganisms, just like this virus, the SARS-CoV-2.
Okay, now apart from ventilation, are we assuming here that viewers will, notwithstanding the improved ventilation, will still be required to wear masks inside the cinemas?
Of course, the minimum health protocol should still be implemented. So in spite of this allowing cinemas to open, we need to have this safeguard so that we can still protect public health. And that would be part of the safeguards that we need to enforce and that they have to make sure that they are going to implement so that we can prevent transmission of disease within these spaces.
Okay, Yusek Vergere, well, just one last question. What about capacity of cinemas? What will be the cap on that?
Well, first, we need to determine what would be the area of the cinema. as we always say, there should be this physical distance between and among all of these people who's going to go inside the cinemas. No? So there would be physical distancing. But considering also that this would be something that there is this enclosed space, so we need to properly assess and determine how many would be the capacity in every cinema that we have in every establishment. So that's why we were saying that before this gets implemented, there should be proper assessment and standards should be implemented, and it should be monitored by the specific national agencies and issue the guidelines so that all of these establishments will be guided.
Okay, maraming salamat po. That was Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere. Cinemas and video game arcades are a big part of the malling experience, of course, but while operators say they are ready to reopen theaters, is the public ready to go back? Dale De Vera with this story.
Cinemas in GCQ areas will remain closed at least until March 1. The opening of movie theaters has been deferred following opposition from Metro Manila LGUs. But mall operators argue with health protocols in place, they are ready to resume operations. Ayala Mall says the closure of cinemas and entertainment arcades affect not only their customers but also their employees. Robinson's Movie World echoes this sentiment, but maintains they will be following the government's guidelines.
The cinemas are always an attraction. Pero sa ngayon, yun nga, we need to prioritize the safety. So we'll follow the regulations set forth by the ITF and all the agencies, plus of course the approval of the LGU mayors.
For now, mall operators say ticket prices will retain its pre-pandemic value and that while facilities have been closed, they continue disinfecting cinemas. Dr. Evelina Lagamay of the Chinese General Hospital says cinemas may reopen as long as it follows some guidelines.
Siguro ang sasuggest ko, bawal na lang kumain sa loob ng sinihan kasi mag-aalis ka ng mask at saka ng shield. Pero yung panonood, pwede naman.
But even with health and safety protocols in place, is the public ready to return to movie houses?
Siguro hindi muna. Kasi, siyempre, kulob yun, ventilated. Baka may mga sakit na maawa tayo ron.
Para sa akin, ma'am, hindi po muna. Kasi, tumataas pa rin po yung bilang ng mga nagpa-positive sa COVID.
Malacanang and the Trade Department earlier backed the reopening of cinemas, saying it will revive some 300,000 jobs in the industry. For News 5, Dale De Vera, we are One News.
These are the other big stories tonight. The palace flip-flopped once again. The government's top spokesperson says the president is now willing to receive the COVID-19 jab publicly. Malacanang says Duterte wants to boost vaccine confidence. 19 new cases of the British variant of COVID-19 have been detected in the country. One of the new cases is linked to the clustering of infections among MRT3 employees. And the police took away 20 students during a raid at the Gov't school in Cebu. The police clarifies the operation was not an attack, but a rescue effort. All that after the break.
Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. You're still watching The Big Story. Human rights groups are condemning a police raid on a Lumad school in Cebu where more than 20 students and teachers were taken away by authorities. The PNP is branding this as a rescue operation, but critics believe otherwise. Patricia Mangune with the details.
Tension filled this Gov't school at the University of San Carlos in Talamaban, Cebu City. Police entered according to Save Our Schools network, children and teachers alike were forcibly taken by the police. But for the PNP, this was not an attack, but a rescue operation. They said the 20 minors have been transferred safely to the custody of the DSWD, while 7 teachers were arrested as suspects. The PNP said they were accompanied by the Lumad's parents who have been searching for the children the past 2 years. The police claims the minors were trafficked to Cebu to be child combatants of the CPP-NPA. But Save Our Schools network denies that the Gov't school was a guise for NPA recruitment. They say the children evacuated from Mindanao on their own free will.
Sila ay kusang lumahok sa ganitong klaseng paglaban. So walang pagpipilit ang mga dato, ang mga teachers na sumama.
The Gov't school is ran by Lumads and representatives from UP Diliman and the United Church of Christ in the Philippines based in Davao City. Save Our Children network says the children were unable to return to their families due to the pandemic, but that they have their parents' consent.
Ito ay mental torture, emotional torture yung mga bata sa ganitong klaseng kalagayan, kahit pandemya ay walang habas, walang tigil yung ganitong pananakot.
Human rights and militant groups protested in front of the Commission on Human Rights to condemn the raid. Protesters say this is a violation of the rights of Lumad children. They call for the release of the arrested teachers and the students taken into government custody. The suspects will face charges of serious illegal detention, human trafficking, and for violating the Special Protection of Children in Situations of Armed Conflict Act. For News 5, Patricia Mangune. We are One News.
The palace is denying that government is extorting from the United States. That's following pronouncements from President Duterte asking the U.S. to pay up to keep the visiting forces agreement intact. Presidential spokesman Harry Roque says the compensation is meant to uphold the country's national interest, especially now that pandemic-induced expenses are piling up. He adds that, like U.S. ally Pakistan, the Philippines should be getting roughly $16 billion or close to 770 billion pesos. He says this should make up for the possible danger of being caught in between a war with the U.S. rival countries.
Natural, anong gagawin ng mga kalaban ng mga Amerikano? Sasantuhin ba tayo? Miski sabihin natin na hindi po tayo kasali sa kanilang gulo. Hindi po, dahil pinayagan nga natin ang presensya ng mga kasundaluhang Amerikano at ang kanilang mga equipment dito po sa Pilipinas.
Time for an express look at some of the day's big stories. The Health Department on Friday detected 19 new cases of the B117 COVID-19 variant in the country, bringing the total to 44. Among them, a 46-year-old Pasay City resident who is mother to an MRT3 employee. The woman tested positive for COVID-19 on January 25 and is currently under home quarantine. Investigation is ongoing to see if she is linked to the clustering of cases at the MRT. The DOH says there's still no evidence of community transmission of the more infectious variant. A House panel has approved tax exemptions for local government's purchase of COVID-19 vaccines. The measure covers the procurement, importation, storage, transport, distribution, and administration of the doses. House Ways and Means Committee Chair Albay Representative Joey Salceda says this will allow LGUs to buy more doses for their constituents. The Commission on Elections is extending its voter registration schedule to encourage more registrants. COMELEC offices will be open Tuesdays to Saturdays, including holidays, from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. As of February 4, a total of 1.33 million new voters have registered, still short of the COMELEC's target of 4 million. Time for another quick break. When we return, from kilig to heartbreak, take a look at the videos that tugged at everyone's heartstrings on Valentine's Day. All that when we return. Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Gretchen Ho. Let's take a look at the biggest stories on print and online. From the Philippine Star, Foreign Affairs Secretary Teodoro Locsin called the United Nations hypocrites. In a tweet, he accused the UN Human Rights Council of deliberately misinterpreting his statement, calling for a complete restoration of democracy in Myanmar. The Foreign Affairs Department disassociated from the UN resolution, urging the release of Aung San Suu Kyi and other democratic officials. From Business World Live, Converge shares spiked this morning following reports that the internet service provider is in talks with Elon Musk's SpaceX for a possible broadband satellite deal. However, Converge says it is still premature to talk about a possible partnership with SpaceX. And from News 5, 12 hikers are facing complaints for supposed violation of wildlife laws. The group shared photos on social media collecting pitcher plants, which are considered endangered species. They have since deleted the post. If found guilty, they may be imprisoned for 2 to 4 years and fined 30 to 300,000 pesos.
With vaccine confidence remaining low, the palace says the president has finally decided to get inoculated in public. But with shots via the COVAX facility getting delayed, which brand is the president going to receive? Maricel Halili with the details.
The president has changed his mind once again. According to the palace, President Duterte has decided he will receive the COVID-19 jab publicly. Duterte might have been vocal about his preference for China's vaccine, but Malacanang says it's still uncertain which brand he'll receive.
Dahil ninanais po ng presidente na lahat ng Pilipino ay magkaroon ng kumpiyansa na magpabakuna dahil ang bakuna po ang solusyon dito sa pandemya ng COVID-19.
The need to boost vaccine confidence comes on the heels of an Interior Department survey. It showed that only 3 out of 10 in Metro Manila are willing to get vaccinated. The DILG seeks to inoculate 80% of residents.
Gusto natin sabihin sa kanila, magtiwala po sila sa ating gobyerno, sa ating eksperto.
The first batch of 600,000 doses from China's Sinovac will arrive on February 23. 100,000 are allocated for the military. Roque says Sinovac has already completed requirements for emergency use authorization. But as for shots via the COVAX facility, there's no certainty yet on when those will be delivered. 117 shots from Pfizer should have arrived mid-February, but that did not happen.
I have heard Secretary Galvez personally say that the ball is in the hands of the manufacturers. Lahat po ng dokumento na ibigay na natin, inaantay na po natin yung kanilang pirma sa supply agreement.
Roque says vaccine makers want to clarify first as to who will compensate recipients should adverse effects occur. But he says there was no demand for an indemnification bill. PhilHealth is studying providing indemnities.
Ang DOH po ay inaaral din yung tinatawag na protocols on the vaccination, anti-COVID vaccination. Inaaral din ngayon ng PhilHealth ang yung mga pakete, no? Para doon pag nagkakaroon ng adverse effect ang bakuna ay andyan tayo tumulong.
Opo.
As a matter of fact, this coming Thursday, i-discuss yan sa board.
For now, the Health Department is still waiting for the final list of Pfizer vaccine recipients from 34 Metro Manila hospitals. For News 5, Maricel Halili, we are One News.
Time for the big stories in sports. TNT Tropang Giga welcomes back 5-time PBA Coach of the Year, Chot Reyes. Coach Chot was the architect behind 4 of TNT's 7 championships, the most dominant streak in the league at the turn of the decade. He also led the Gilas team's climb to the international stage, coaching the national squad to its first FIBA World Cup appearance since 1978. Coach Chot will be replacing TNT head coach Bong Ravena and active team consultant Mark Dickel. The hosting of the FIBA Asia Cup qualifiers lands back on Philippine shores. That's after the last-minute cancellation of the games in Doha, Qatar due to a rise in COVID-19 cases. 2 groups will now be playing in the Philippines, while 1 group will have their match in Lebanon. The Samahang Basketball ng Pilipinas turned out as the top choice for FIBA since initial planning had already been done back in January. That was before the Philippines bailed out due to travel bans. Apart from the bubble venue being back in Clark, Pampanga, other matters including schedules and logistics will be finalized in the next 10 days. 18-year-old basketball phenom Kai Soto will no longer suit up for Gilas after the cancellation of the Doha Games.
Filipinos had a roller coaster of emotions on Valentine's Day, starting off with some kilig over BinJin. Picking up from where its last ads left off, Smart released its commercial featuring crash landing on new stars turned real-life couple Yoon Bin and Sonia Jin. The two's hologram meetup turned real.
Do you believe this is possible?
I do.
How do you know?
Simple, smart ako.
But Feb 14 became heart-wrenching after Moira released the music video to Paubaya, which has so far garnered 7.1 million views. It stars ex-lovers Joshua Garcia and a runaway bride, Julia Barreto. Was when they found forgiveness that had netizens wondering if their emotional exchange was for real or real.
Masaya ako na masaya ka.
Gusto ko pagigpasaya ka.
For News 5, MJ Marfori, we are One News.
Hindi ko alam kung kikiligin ako o ma-heartbroken ako kasi nakakakilig si yung BinJin. Tapos, ang sakit nung
Pinanood ko rin yung documentary na yun eh. Documentary yun eh, di ba?
Alin?
Yung kay Josh Lia.
Hindi yung docu.
Ay, hindi ba docu? Akala ko totoo eh. Parang, ewan ko, malalaman
Real
natin.
life docu, Oo. Well, whatever happens, we're back to real life. And that wraps up today's big story. I'm Gretchen Ho. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. I'm Robbie Alampay, and we are One News. Good evening.